Blood Pudding. Chapter 1. Lightning Bugs. Mother died in November. Her sudden death left the 7 of us to deal with Jumbo. Vera, the older of my 2 sisters, had it worse. Mother wasn't cold in the grave 6 months when Jumbo started going after her. One warm evening, the next June, while I was out chasing lightning bugs, I looked back and saw Jumbo cuddling Vera on the porch swing. He was coaxing her to tug on his mustache and urging her to sip on his homemade red wine. All the while, he was feeling her up. I had just turned 10, what did I know? But what I saw that night in the shadows on the porch seemed bad. His big, rough miner's hand on her blouse, squeezing her nipple. Sure, Vera was blonde and built strong and had radiant green eyes like Mother, and Jumbo must have been lonely for a woman. But Vera was 15, and she was his daughter. He did other stuff too, and not just on the porch swing. Sometimes we heard Vera crying out from Jumbo's room, like Mother had done. More than once I heard him threaten Vera that if she went up to the church and told the priest anything, he'd take the razor strop to her. I tried to pump up my courage and go to the priest myself, but I didn't want to feel the scalding lashes of his strop either. None of us did. I was ashamed for the family. If I told the priest and word spread around, what then? Would the mine company fire Jumbo and kick us out of the company house? Would we all be sent back to Poland? None of us talked about it. We knew what Jumbo was doing was wrong, but we were afraid to mention it. Even my big brother, Max, who was 16 and tall and brawny and quick to throw a punch, feared Jumbo. So, after Mother died, we plodded along from day to day in that crowded brick box on Robert Street in Rehoboth, Pennsylvania. We all shared grief and shame, and we wished Jumbo would stop hurting Vera. We prayed each night that he would sober up by morning and make his way to the mine. If Jumbo didn't go to the mine, he wouldn't get paid, and we wouldn't eat. We each might end up in an orphanage in Pittsburgh or maybe Poland. Back on that terrible November day at the graveyard when we buried Mother, Vera announced she would quit school. "Somebody has to take her place and look after the family," she said, her pale chin poked out and her arms cuddling little Cassie and baby Blizzard. On the way home from the burial, Jumbo sighed. "I'm beat. I don't feel like cooking tonight." "I'll do it," Vera said. "Spaghetti." "Can you make it like she made it?" "Taste it and see, Pop." On that gloomy November day, Vera didn't know what she was in for. None of us did. Chapter 2. Poplars. Mother's cemetery was brand new, almost empty. Her grave was the 3rd they dug, set high up on a grassy hill. Half a mile down a long slope stood a straight line of young yellow-leafed poplars, separating the graveyard's acreage from a small stone chapel with an iron fence around it. On top of the chapel steeple was a tiny iron cross. I knew Mother would enjoy that view. Often she'd told us that the rows of poplars here and there on the outskirts of Pittsburgh reminded her of Poland. Over in the old country, she said, the farm fields were separated by rows of tall poplars to shield the crops and animals from the strong winds. There wasn't much wind that dark day by the new grave, but there was a steady, cold rain. Everybody seemed in a rush to bury Mother fast and get out of it. The 2 cemetery workers holding the ropes dropped her so suddenly, her coffin cracked when it hit bottom. I knew that couldn't hurt her, though, because she was dead. 2 nights before, I had watched her die. I was convinced that, broken coffin or not, her wonderful spirit would abide there on that hill forever, seeing the sun rise to the east and admiring the distant poplars and the stone chapel with the little cross and watching the cemetery fill up with more dead people. In church, I always heard the priests talk about heaven and purgatory and how we should pray to all the holy saints to help a person's soul after death. But those warnings confused me. No, I knew Mother would remain right there, overlooking the chapel and the poplars, which meant I could come back and visit her, provided I was never sent back to Poland. The older children, Max, Vera, and Lucy, had attended funerals before. They told us what to do. Ziggy and I watched them and tried to follow their cues. Once the men dropped Mother in the hole and yanked out the ropes, we each tossed a white rosebud on her and picked up handfuls of black dirt from the muddy pile and sprinkled small clods down on her. But when the workers started shoveling in big heaps of soil that banged hard on the coffin lid, Ziggy let out a loud grunt. He turned with a wild look in his eyes and took off like a shot running down the hill. I ran after him. Mother would have wanted me to. Ziggy was 2 years older than me, but he was feeble-minded and clumsy and had terrible eyesight and was easily upset by anything strange or different. 2 years in a row, Mother had tried to start him in first grade at Rehoboth Elementary School, but each time the teachers sent him home. The second time, the bratty boys chased him all the way back to our house, shouting, "Ziggy Piggy, Ziggy Piggy!" They whipped his back with thorny switches and made him bleed and bawl. The teachers told Mother that sending Ziggy to school was torture for him and a waste of everybody's time. Zig could barely tie his own shoes, let alone learn to add or subtract or read a clock or spell. School, they insisted, was futile. A state mental hospital or even the county work farm over near Beaver Run might be the proper place for him. In time, Ziggy might learn to do useful labor, they said. He would be in the company of other low IQ unfortunates, where he would feel equal and happy and possibly turn out to be productive. Mother and Jumbo had decided that sending Ziggy to a mental institution or a work farm would cast a shameful light on our family. So instead, they kept him home, and with me as his keeper. Once I had mastered double knotting my own shoes and other basic grooming matters, Mother charged me with making sure Ziggy's laces were tied right. I was also to be sure he brushed his teeth and didn't pick his nose in public and flush the toilet. I was to check that he buttoned his shirt straight and didn't let his underpants creep up over his belt and didn't leave his fly open to the breeze. I had to make sure he didn't step on his eyeglasses or say odd things to the children on our street. Most of the girls were afraid of Ziggy and avoided him like a skunk or a patch of poison ivy. I was also to tell Mother whenever he wet the sheets, which was easy for me to detect since Zig and I usually shared the same bed. These duties with Ziggy kept me from starting school in Rehoboth with the other children my age. But Lucy, or sometimes Vera, tutored me at home in reading and writing and math. Meanwhile, if any mean boys came around to taunt Ziggy, I was to tell Max immediately, who would settle scores. Mother's death did not change my commitment to Zig. I'd be there for him, and he knew it. Now that Mother had been dropped fresh in the ground, my promise seemed all the more important. When Jumbo saw us running away from the graveside, he hollered down the hill at us. By that time, we had almost reached the row of poplars and were out of breath. We stopped, and I looked at Ziggy. He was panting and sobbing heavily. His face was messy with tears dripping down both sides of his blunt nose. Thin gray snot leaked over his trembling lips. Behind his horn-rimmed glasses, his eyes were swollen and red. He had rubbed his eye sockets with his muddy fingers. Particles of the grave dirt had lodged under the lids on both sides. Dense black finger swirls covered his wide cheeks and brow, right up to his curly blonde hairline. "Wait, Zig," I said. I stooped and swiped my handkerchief on the wet grass to moisten it. Then I cleaned off his glasses and his face as best I could. Zig let me dab the corner tip of the handkerchief under his eyelids. I had done that to him before many times, so he knew how to hold still and not blink. He didn't want to risk another bad eye infection. He knew eye infections were trouble and could blind him. When I was done, I hugged him hard. I knew he felt terrified and disoriented. I had seen Mother die, but Ziggy hadn't. He hugged me back and let out one of his long, heavy groans into my ear.